jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again, and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump, will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So,
check that, motherfuckers.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having, on the short end of the stick, in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say, they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you.
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it's legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, the Democrats let him do that, you dumb bitch.
And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that.
Well,
a 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term? They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote.
There's an election coming up,
She won't even come
genius.
close to it. So it's just
What?
talk. You know what it reminds me of when they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't.
Oh, no,
But
just so you know, I don't give a fuck
we don't
about
have to
JD.
discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization.
IVF?
The IVF,
No, you
I have been
haven't.
a leader. In fact, when they got a
leader?
very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a
Everyone
leader
knows.
on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay,
No.
would you do that?
No.
Why don't you ask her
Why-
that
why
question?
don't you
That's
answer
the
the
problem.
question? Would you
Because
veto?
under
They
Roe
left
v.
their-
Wade,
they left their
you
mics
could-
on. Let's
you
go.
could do
Let's
abortions in
go.
the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after
Let's
birth.
go.
Just look at the
Each other.
governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of
Get it
Virginia
on.
said we put the baby aside
Open
and then
the
we
mics and
determine
let
what
him
we
go.
want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats,
Oh, my
voters
God.
across
You
the
can't let
board
him
in this
fucking lash
country.
you like that and
Vice
not say
President
something
Harris,
man.
you were
What the
tasked by
fuck?
President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings
This
reached
is
a
not
record high
real.
in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And
Borders
that
are.
bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job.
What happened to the
It would have
wall?
allowed us to stem the
We're gonna
flow
build
of
the wall and
fentanyl
Mexico's
coming
gonna
into
pay
the
for it.
United
Are you gonna
States.
bring that up
I
at
know
all?
there
You're
are
just
so
gonna
many
let that
families
ride
watching
right over
tonight
you?
who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill?
What happened?
Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And
wanna
understand,
be able to
this
point to you and
comes
say,
at
"Hey,
a
you haven't
time
fixed this problem."
where the people of our
That's why.
country actually need
And
a
you didn't
leader
fix the problem,
who
regardless
engages
of
in
Donald Trump. You
solutions,
can't let
who
Donald Trump
actually
stop you from
addresses
doing
the
shit.
problems at
What the
hand.
fuck?
But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot
You're
tonight,
running
even
trying
when
to
it's not the
fix the
subject that
problem.
is being raised. And I'm going to actually do
You should
something
just
really
fix it.
unusual, and I'm going to invite you to
Talent
attend
Joe,
one of
he said
Donald
some
Trump's
bullshit
rallies,
about
because it's a
fixing the
really
fucking
interesting
lead
thing to
pipes.
watch.
Well, bro,
You
you've
will
been in
see
office
during the
for 4
course of his
years.
rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the rallies.
Well, why didn't you
She
put
said
the
people
fucking
start
wall
leaving.
up?
People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And
said
the
you were
people
gonna
that
do
do
it.
go,
You
she's
said you were
busing
gonna
them
get
in
Mexico
and
to pay
paying
for it.
them to be there.
Why are they
and
able to come
then
over this
showing
wall
them
that
in a
you
different
supposedly
light.
built?
So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
We have the
That's
most
because
beautiful
people want to
rallies.
take their country back. Our country
Our
is
rallies
being
are so
lost. We're a
great that we
failing
get
nation.
shot at them.
And it happened three
What
and
a
a half
great
years
rally
ago.
we have.
And
What the fuck is this guy
what's
talking
going on
about?
here,
Are
you're
you
going to end up in World
fucking your
War
mind?
III, just
You
to go
got
to
shot
another
at your own
subject.
fucking rally.
What
And
they
your
have
rallies are
done
so
to our
great.
country by
What the
allowing these
fuck?
millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
No
And
way
this is
is
what's
he saying
happening
this.
in our country. And it's a shame.
You believe
as
that?
far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason
That's
they
like
go
when they
is they
said
like
kids
what I
were
say.
going in and
They want to bring
using
our
litter
country back.
boxes
They
in
want to
elementary
make America
school.
great
Do
again. It's a
you
very simple
believe this
phrase.
stuff, sir?
Make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she
What the
becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll
They're
end up being
eating dogs and
Venezuela
cats.
on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did
That
reach
is
out to the
proven
city
false.
manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well,
All
I've
of this.
seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
The people on
this is a
television say
clear-
my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good
Yeah.
thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people
I'm
on
taking it
television
from
are
the city
saying the
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of
There
that.
is
Vice
no
President Harris, I'll
way.
let you respond to the rest of what
He
you've heard.
is not.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney.
That is not something to brag
if you
about.
want to really know
You are
the inside
dumb.
track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear
That's
already,
not-
just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of
Just
staff, a
ask
four-star
Darth
general,
Vader
has
if
said he
I'm
has
a good
contempt for the
guy.
Constitution of the United States.
fuck?
His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another
Yeah, you go to work
Trump
for Donald Trump
term.
to end your career.
And when we listen to this kind of
Somehow
rhetoric,
he deflects
when the
moves
issues
past
that
all of
affect the American people are not being addressed,
Except for
I
the
think the
election.
choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled
Wasn't that what you promised
situations
to do?
anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you
did a
take
bad
a guy
job
like
'cause you never
Esper, he
did it.
was no good,
You
I
never
fired
did
him.
the
So he writes a
jobs.
book.
Dude,
Another one
what?
writes a
Are
book.
you
Because
ever
with
gonna-
me, they can
are you
write
gonna
books,
call
but
him out on
nobody
that, or
else
you just
can
let him
be.
say the shit?
But they have done such a poor
are gonna
job,
let him just
and
say
they
the shit.
never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the
If you did
inflation.
such a great
They didn't
job
fire
getting out of
any of the
fucking Afghanistan,
economists.
then
They
we
have the
wouldn't have
same
had to
people.
evacuate
That's a
them at
good
that
way
point.
not to
And
have
that's
books
true.
written about you.
If you had a
But
great
just
strategy
to
before
finish,
we ever
I got
got
more
into office
votes
and
than any
removed them
Republican
from that
in history
for fucking
by far.
20 years later of
In
this
fact,
war.
I got more votes
Bro,
than
what?
any
You had
president,
4
sitting
fucking years and
president
you didn't do
in
it.
history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get
You're
back
gonna
to your
let him walk. You're
deportation
gonna just- oh my God, this is the
proposal
worst debate.
that the vice
These
president
people
has
don't know how
reacted
to
to
debate.
as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation
Grab that man
operation
by
in the
his
history of our
jugular and
country. You
slam
say
him
you
in
would
the
use the
fucking
National
floor.
Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought
How is
possible.
that
President Trump, as you
new?
know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris, I'll
FBI
give you
they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich
Just call him
coming
out.
from someone
Say
who has
that's
been
not true.
prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next
felonies?
big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear, where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those
you're there.
cases was
I am
involved with the
getting
DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani
can't
Willis
feel right.
to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh,
There's my tongue.
he's a criminal. They're the ones
tongue's
that
in my mouth.
made
Where's
them
your
go
tongue?
after me. By the way, Joe Biden
Jaybird?
was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election.
President
They're
Trump-
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick
They're
response
fake
here, Vice
cases.
President
You were
Harris, on this
convicted of
notion
them. Why
of
didn't you beat them if
weaponization
they
of
were
the Justice
fake?
Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently
This is the
ruled
voice
that the
you
former
chose.
president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has
had to
openly
make a
said
choice at
he
some
would
point.
terminate, I'm quoting, terminate
Just like I
the
had to choose, I
Constitution
had
of the
freedom
United
of
States,
YouTube
that he would
models.
weaponize the
I had to make a
Department
choice
of
and
Justice
make the
against
debut.
his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now
Yeah,
the court won't
because
stop him. We know
J.D.
J.D.
Vance is
Vance is
fighting
not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
We
Vice
got
President
stop
Harris,
it.
random
thank you.
guy just out of
Vice
law school
President
as the
Harris,
Attorney
in your last
General.
run for president.
Weaponized, please.
We gotta
This is the
continue
one
here.
that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They
took it
talk
to the
about
ear, not the
democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a
President
fake
Trump,
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get-
went
Russia,
nowhere.
We have a lot to get
Russia.
to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban
I want them to
fracking.
interrupt
Now you
each other,
don't.
too.
You wanted mandatory government
It started
buyback
happening.
programs
They
for
almost
assault
started letting
weapons.
them
Now
go,
your
and then they
campaign says you don't. You supported
But they're both
decriminalizing
pussies 'cause
border
they wouldn't let
crossings.
them just
Now you're
be
taking
like,
a
oh, we
harder
have to
line.
have the
I know
lights
you
off.
say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that
Okay.
very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact,
Would you like them
I
to
was
drill,
the
baby, drill?
tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is
So you're
that
into
we
the
have
fossil
got to
fuels.
invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather.
Having a
And
friend
my
in
focus
high
then
school?
on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable.
I had a
My
friend in
work
high school,
that is
too.
about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings
look at the
values
mail.
and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength
you're
is not in
beating him
beating
up and
people down, it's
name-calling
in
him.
lifting people
This
up.
is a debate.
I intend to
That's
be
what you're supposed
that
to be
president.
doing.
President Trump, your
Well, first of all, I
response?
wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens.
Beat him up with
and
your
a great
words.
father, and I learned a lot
Your
from him.
fucking
But I was given a
intellect.
fraction
What?
of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And
No,
when
you
people
didn't.
see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all
Against
that stuff
defund
up.
the police?
Very wrongly,
she's been
very
for
horribly.
defund the police.
And everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're
Bro.
all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out.
You're lying.
She went out
Get
in
it.
Minnesota
Don't.
and wanted
It
to
doesn't
let
matter.
criminals
It
that
doesn't
killed
matter what the
people,
fucking
that
mic's on.
burned down
Just
Minneapolis.
fucking go.
She went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so
Day
important
one.
in my opinion. So
This guy
I
loves
got
his
the oil
fucking
business going like nobody has
phrases.
ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go
Yeah,
back
they
to
went to the
Trump.
roof, and
But
then
if
they
she
went
won the
back.
election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they
What?
need a whole desert to get some energy to
can't
come
run
out.
our
You ever see a
economy
solar
right now
plant?
on
By the
that.
way,
That
I'm a
is
big
not
fan of
gonna
solar.
happen.
But they
What's
take
wrong with these people?
400,
President Trump.
500 acres of
shattering
desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days.
We can't go
And I want to
electric,
talk about
and
the
we can't
peaceful
get rid of
transfer
the
of
gas.
power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone
What?
of our democracy, and the role of a president
Let's be
in a
real.
moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you
And the
told your supporters to
fucking
march to the
military
Capitol. You
runs
said you
on
would be
oil.
right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control
Nobody?
police
What about
officer
the fucking
that
police
should have
officer?
never, ever shot her.
What?
It's a disgrace. But
You
we
were
didn't do
calling
this
for Mike
group of
Pence,
people
then,
that have been
basically.
treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well,
Are
I'm
we
surprised you're not
talking
talking
about
about
the
the
border
border
or
yet.
January
That's because
6th?
she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America,
As
they're
soon as
coming
they're
in from
caught,
all over
what?
the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech.
So
I said,
no,
I think
you
it's
don't
gonna be
regret
good.
anything.
I went to Nancy
Really?
Pelosi and the mayor of Washington,
Nothing.
D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible
Why
for what
would
happened.
they need
want to get rid of that
10,000
tape.
National Guard
It
people
would have never
to
happened
protect
if Nancy
what?
Pelosi and the
You
mayor
want them
of
to protect
Washington did their
Congress?
jobs. I wasn't
Because you knew
responsible
that
for
they were gonna
security.
come
Nancy
rushing at them?
Pelosi was
What?
responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you
Why
as
didn't
president,
you
not
stop
about
your own
former Speaker
supporters from
Pelosi. But I
doing
do want
that?
Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died.
10,000 what?
And understand, the former president has been
People?
indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember,
That was after
when it came to
she
the
got
Proud Boys
ran over
militia.
by that Mustang.
the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page.
He makes up
And
a
if that
lot.
was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place
I would be
in our campaign for you
surprised
to
if
stand
5% of
for
the
country,
numbers he throws
to
out there in
stand
life were
for our
accurate.
democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the
Yeah, 'cause
past.
there's not
Let me
gonna
just
be a
follow up
fucking-
here.
It was a different term, and it was
A
a
rally
term
in
that related to
Washington
energy
on-
because they have destroyed our energy business. That was
But
where
you guys
bloodbath
win
was.
again. What?
Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they
All
covered
the
it. If
right-wing
they go an
pundits?
extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to
You
come
can
through
write
the
in someone.
southern border? How come she's not doing it?
You're not even
And
part
I'll
of
tell
the
you what I would do,
Electoral
and I would be very
College,
proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate
You're
right
going to vote
now.
in Illinois,
I'd like to
and
see
no
her
matter
go
what
down
happens, the Democrats
to
gonna win.
Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a
So
lot of
just
time.
pay
Go
attention
down
to
to,
your
because
fucking
she's been so
local
bad, it's so
elections.
ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The
happened to the
President
wall?
of the United States, you'll get him out of bed,
I
you'll
don't
wake him up
understand.
at
You
4 o'clock
promised
in the
Mexico
afternoon,
was
you'll
gonna
say,
pay
come
for a
on
wall.
down to the
Where
office,
is the
let's sign a
wall?
bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed. All he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are
please
killing
do.
many people,
I wanna-
unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging
said
that you
that.
lost in
No, I
2020?
don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you
So
have to
you
do is
didn't
look at
lose?
it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for
You let-
approval.
you
I got almost
supposedly
75
won the
million
election,
votes,
you
the most
let
votes
them
any
run
sitting
the
president
fucking
has
country
ever
for
gotten.
4
I was told
years?
if I got 63,
What
which
kind of
was
a
what I got in
bitch are you if you
2016,
actually believe
you
that
can't
you
be
won?
beaten.
What
The
kind of
election,
fucking get
people
yourself
should never
walked
be
all
thinking
over,
about an
stepped
election
on
as
type of little
fraudulent. We need two
bitch are
things.
you?
We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No
Republican.
judge looked at it.
And said there
They
was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we
Because
lost.
there's no
if you
evidence
look at
for
the
you to
facts, and I'd
stand
love
on.
to have you'll do a
What?
special on it.
That is not
I'll
why.
show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we
The
have to
judges
solve the
looked at
problem that
them
we have right
in
now.
the
That's
fucking
old news.
Republican
And the
states.
problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice
Yeah,
President
because
Harris,
it's
you
filled
heard
with
the president here
boomers.
tonight. He said he
What
didn't
are you
say
gonna
that
do
he
when
lost
you
by
get
a
into
whisker.
office?
He
You're
still
still gonna
believes,
die.
he did not lose the election.
You're gonna die pretty soon,
that
too,
was won
sir.
by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President
Biden's
Trump
probably gonna die before
about this
all of us.
upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart.
Kim Jong-un,
Prime Minister of Hungary.
Xi,
They said, why is the
Putin.
whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need
Because
Trump
of
back as
Netanyahu?
president. They were
Because
afraid
of
of him.
Putin?
China was afraid, and I don't like
And
to use the word afraid,
Zelensky?
but I'm just quoting him.
What? You
China
don't
was
know
afraid
what?
of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline And Biden put
They
it
weren't
back on
afraid
day
of
one,
you.
but he
They were
ended the
afraid of
XL
how
pipeline.
crazy you were and how
The
unhinged
XL
you were.
pipeline in our country, he ended that.
They were
But he
afraid
let
of
the
the
Russians
American
build a
weapon.
pipeline going all
They weren't
over
afraid
Europe
of
and
you.
heading into
They were
Germany,
afraid
the
of
biggest
you
pipeline
losing it
in the world.
and
Look,
using those weapons
Viktor Orban
in an
said it. He
unconventional
said the
way.
most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw
We had
at
no
a debate
problems.
just
You were
a
in
few months
Afghanistan
ago,
for all
that
of
if
the
he
time
weren't
you
in
were
that
in fucking
debate, he'd be
office.
running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got
President.
14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm okay
President,
with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said,
Talking
quote,
about
Israel has a right to
why is
defend
the
itself,
war
but you
blowing up?
added, quote,
Well, I
it
wonder.
matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how
Do
we
you
got
have
here.
the intelligence
On
of
October
what
7,
happened?
Hamas, a
Or is it
terrorist
political
organization,
fucking game and turned
slaughtered
into actually being a
1,200
fucking
Israelis,
worse political decision
many of
he's ever
them
made.
young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so, absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also
And how
true,
is it
far too
defending
many
itself?
innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will
need to
continue to
remove
work around the
Netanyahu,
clock
and
on
we
that.
need to remove Hamas.
Work around the clock, also understanding
No.
that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will
And
assure
we
you
must
always,
remove
I
Hamas,
will always
and
give
we
Israel
must
the
remove
ability to defend
Netanyahu.
itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing
I
of
would
more
not
innocent
negotiate
civilians
with
in
either
Gaza?
one of
If I
them.
were president, it would have never started.
Get
If I
fucked.
were president, Russia would have never, ever. I know Putin
Tell
very
them both,
well.
oh,
He would
is
have
this how
never-
you
and there
deal
was
with
no
your
threat of
problems,
it either,
Israel?
by the way,
Well,
for
I'm going
4
to do
years.
that to you if you don't
Have gone
figure
into
your shit out.
Ukraine
And
and
Hamas,
killed
if you don't get the fuck
millions
out,
of
I'm going to do
people
that to
when
you.
ended up far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to
Because
make
he's
a
a
very important
douchebag.
speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong
That's
about
when
that
you
one.
attack him for
She
having
hates
zero
Israel. At
fraternity
the same time, in
and
her own
friends.
way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone.
Christians?
It would have never happened. Iran was broke under
Muslims?
Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money.
Terror!
It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very
Like a
well,
woman's
actually.
maid.
They had no money for terror. They were broke.
Terror!
Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with
How?
Ukraine and Russia ended.
And
If
you
I'm
can do it,
president
why don't
elect,
you do
I'll
it
get
now?
it
Why do you
done
wait till you're in
before
office?
even becoming
Does it not matter
president.
that much
Vice
to you?
President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have
If you
my
actually
entire
can, you
career
would
and life
give the
supported
fucking administration
Israel
that's
and
in
the
office right
Israeli
now
people.
the
He knows that
tools to do
he's
whatever
trying
you
to,
can do
again,
to get it
divide
done.
and
You dumb
distract from the reality,
saying you can
which is
fucking
it is
solve this
very
problem,
well
but you're
known
not solving it?
that Donald Trump
Because
is
you're
weak
not elected
and
yet?
wrong on
You
national
are an
security and
asshole.
foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators
Not
and
love
autocrats
letter.
are rooting
That's
for
not
you to be
honest.
president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why
Donald Trump is not a homosexual.
so many
for Kim
military leaders who
Jong-un.
you have worked with
That
have
is
told me
not
you are a
factual.
disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back
This
in a
is
moment.
going great. What the fuck?
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
Unreal. We're gonna turn that down because we don't need no sort of commercial bullshit. This guy, we're gonna go, hey. How we doing? How we doing there? Justin, you still with me? Mr. Justin? You're with me? I'm gonna say no. 'Cause I don't hear you in chat. I'm going to write you on this last thing you said. Oh, Justin's still here? Yay? Kanye is in the house? What? We are from Chicago. The thing is that Kanye, I feel bad for him because he's lost his mom, but also he abandoned Chicago. He ran off to LA. I mean, I also feel bad for him because he clearly has a mental health issue. But there's many things to dislike about him. But then again, we're all complex human beings. You can be a complete asshole in a lot of situations and still be not wrong in some, as evidenced by Tyreek Hill. Otherwise, a terrible asshole type of human being. But when the police did to him, he kind of was a little bit of an obnoxious asshole to them, but their escalation and outrageous levels were beyond what was needed. And so in that situation, even though he's a total asshole guy, he may not have been the asshole in that situation. Although his asshole tendency ways are what led to that happening. If you know what I'm talking about. I don't know if you know. Sometimes you're late to the party. Perhaps he'll be texting me about it in 2 weeks. Did you get the message I sent you about your girl and her Target commercial? Like, dude, this girl's been around. She fucking blew up 12 months ago, and next thing you know, she's doing Target commercials. How quick can you run the sellout circle? What the fuck? Man, I just lost all respect for her, and like between that and between her not handling fame very well, it's I'm over it. You know what? No, you didn't hear it? Or no, you don't agree? Great. It looks like it's about to come back. That guy is what? Look at no fear. He's giving himself a thing during the presidential debate. They're boosting.
So you have a couple
They're
loaded
not.
and ready to go.
The house is destroyed, but the flag.
Did you see him like he was flying around doing all... Oh, this is a political advertisement. No, this is not.
ABC's World
Is this
News
a political
Tonight
adver-
with
Oh,
David
yes,
Moore
this
is
is a
America's
political
most watched newscast.
No, that's
What does
not.
it take
Yeah,
to
see?
be the most
This is
watched
an
newscast
ABC
in America?
News fucking... Oh my God, during the debates?
This is our Combat Operations Center.
We're approaching the gate. Militants
Oh
came in
my
from-
God, you're doing this?
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
my
You're
God.
watching America's number
can't
one
believe
streaming
this.
news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live. Live from the National
I
Constitution
can't
Center
believe
in
that they just
Philadelphia,
ran that
Pennsylvania.
promotion of
Here
themselves
again,
during that?
David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC
Whoa.
News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here,
That's
and I
a
want to turn to the
little,
war in Ukraine. We're now
opportunistic.
2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend
I'd
Ukraine
probably
from
only
Russia,
give a
from
bigger
Vladimir
fix. There's
Putin, to
something wrong
defend their
with that,
sovereignty, their
right?
democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if
Everyone else
Putin
probably
wins,
thinks like,
he
oh,
may
yeah,
be
of
emboldened
course
to
that
move
would
even
happen.
further into other countries. You have said
not
you would solve
show an
this war in
expose on
24
how
hours. You
great I
said so
am
just
on this
before the
hero
break
running
tonight.
through the
How
battlefield as a
exactly would
reporter.
you do that? And I want to ask you a
What?
very simple question
Bro,
tonight. Do you want
this is
Ukraine
not
to win
real.
this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're
Millions?
getting, which are fake numbers. Look,
Millions?
we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are.
God.
They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled
Jesus
before I even
Christ.
become president. If I win, when I'm
Then you should
president,
have already gotten it done.
and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him.
So you didn't even know that when he was
had no
building up
idea how to stop
forces
it,
on the
and
edge
now
of
you have
Ukraine,
millions of
on the
people
border,
dead, and it's
that he
only
was
getting
going to
worse,
cross
and it could
over and
lead to
attack,
World
then
War
you're an
III.
idiot,
Don't
bro.
kid yourself, David.
You thought that
We're
he was
playing
using
with
that in
World War III,
negotiation
and we have a
tactic?
president that
What
we
is
don't
wrong
even
with
know
these
if he's.
people?
Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog.
There's
We don't
something
even
wrong
know.
with
Is he
everyone
our
in this
president?
fucking debate.
But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to define one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier. Please, I'll give you a minute here.
Let's go.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000
Why don't you
men
guys just go back
and
and forth,
women,
please?
but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please.
There
He
you
would have
go.
been sitting
Get him.
in Moscow.
Let's go.
Much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear
people?
weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually,
Nobody ever thinks
maybe
about
he'll
that?
use them,
What?
and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he
you
does have
stupid?
that.
That's why
Something
people
we don't
haven't
even
gone
like
in
to
and
talk
attacked
about.
Russia.
Nobody likes to talk
That's why
about
NATO
it.
hasn't
But
gone
just
in
so
and
you
fucking actually
understand,
fought
they
themselves.
sent her to
Are you
negotiate
stupid?
peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She
about
was the
stupid.
emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with
call him the kettle.
Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later.
Vice
And
President-
that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something.
What about
she
your
is a
dude,
horrible negotiator. They
Mike
sent her in
Pence?
to negotiate as
You
soon
seem
as
to
they
not like
left,
him.
Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. and that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen, he's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved.
Well, thanks for teaching us about
And
Afghanistan.
Abdul is the head
I
of
didn't
the
know who the
Taliban. He is
Taliban
still
was.
the head of the Taliban. And I told
Fuck,
Abdul,
bro.
don't do
Do
it
you remember
anymore. You
Osama
do it
bin Laden?
anymore, you're going to have
Isn't it about to be
problems.
a 9/11?
And he said, why
What
do you
the
send me a
fuck?
picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left We wouldn't have left
Why didn't you do
$85
it?
billion worth of brand new, beautiful
What?
military
No.
equipment behind. And just to finish,
You failed.
they
You didn't do
blew it. The agreement said you have to do this,
You're a
and they
fucking
didn't do it.
numbskull.
They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I wanna move on.
And these people did
You
the
didn't
worst
get it done.
withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most
4 years of
embarrassing
office,
moment in the
bro.
history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia
What?
attacked
You're a little
Ukraine,
bitch.
because they saw
You
how
get the wall
incompetent
built, you didn't
she
get that done?
and her boss
You
are.
didn't get a lot of
President
shit
Trump,
that you
thank
said
you.
you were going to do done.
I want to move on now to
Fuck
race and
off.
politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black."
Oh,
I want to
no.
ask a bigger picture question here
This is
tonight.
not good.
Why do you believe
Don't
it's
go down
appropriate
this
to
road.
weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I don't
asking.
know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was
She
black,
put out?
and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember
What
how
about
Donald Trump
sexism?
started. He was land, he owned land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same
You
individual
remember.
who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
You gonna respond
This
again,
is the
bro?
most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know
She
the
is
gentleman,
Biden.
she says. She is Biden. The worst
not
inflation
gonna
we've
die
ever
in
had.
3 years.
A horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I'm certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about
$25,000 of
belittling
assistance?
and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a
just let
plan
him turn
to
the thing back. You
confiscate
guys have
everybody's
lost control
gun.
again.
President Trump,
She
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on
to
to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in
Suck
Pennsylvania
dick,
or
man.
anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her
Jesus
plan is
Christ.
until just recently.
I just need
Lindsey
to respond
Graham,
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Just say what you
president
gotta
has
say.
said something
We
twice
already
to
let the
respond.
fucking
I'm
shit
sorry,
go.
we're
I just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up
Do
with
you have a
something, and we are
plan?
working on things, we're going to do it, and we're going to replace
What
it.
is
But
your plan?
remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have
What
been
is your
good to just
plan
let
to
it rot
fix
and let it
things?
go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And
what are
we
you
will
gonna do?
is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our
You've had
people,
9
our
years to come up with
population,
a plan.
less money and be better health care than
What is your
Obamacare,
plan?
then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as
So
good
you
as it
haven't
can
come
be
up with
run.
anything
So
better.
just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not
What
president
are
right
they?
now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we
If
come
you
up with
come up with
something
something,
that's
so you
better
don't
and
have
less
concepts?
expensive. And there are concepts and options we have.
If you come
to
up with
do
these
that.
concepts,
and you'll
or
be
do
hearing
you
about
have
it
them?
in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017,
Fuck.
you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system.
kidding me right
2
now?
years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4
Here's
years
the
as vice
plan.
president, private health care options.
Single
But
payer option
what we
for
need to do
everyone.
is maintain
You
and
can still
grow
have
the
your private
Affordable Care.
insurance.
But
If you
I'll
want to
get
pay
to that,
out of
Lindsay. I
your
just
own
need to
pocket
respond to a
extra,
previous
by
point
all means do
that
that.
the
But there
former
should be a
president has
single
made.
payer option
I've
for
made very
everyone.
clear my position
Boom,
on
done.
fracking.
Just like
And
every
then
other
this
fucking
business about taking
first
everyone's
world
guns
country.
away.
Done.
Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away.
Democrats
so stop
bent
with
over
the
backwards
continuous
and took
lying
it up
about
the
this
ass of
stuff.
the Republicans and didn't get
As
that
it
done
relates
to
to the
begin with when
Affordable Care Act,
Obamacare
understand,
was
let's
supposed to have
just
been passed
look at
that
the
way.
history to
You
know where
fucking
people
idiots.
stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60
No one
times
says you can't have
he
private
tried to get
insurance
rid of the
in
Affordable
addition
Care Act.
to the
60
public
times.
option.
I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the
He
time,
was a
because he
fucking
got
fraud.
caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that
McCain
night,
was a war
walked onto
prisoner.
the Senate floor and said,
I like
no,
you.
you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance
helped
companies to
the
deny people
very
with pre-existing
poorest of the
conditions.
people.
I don't have to tell the people watching tonight. You remember
But
what
it
that was
hasn't
like?
helped enough people.
Remember when an insurance company could
And
deny
that was not what was
if a
supposed to
child had
happen.
asthma, if someone was a breast cancer
And that is
survivor,
not what happens
if a
in other
grandparent had diabetes?
Completely
And
industrialized
thankfully,
first world
as I've been
countries.
vice president and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
pass his
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of
mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats
For 10
that kept
years?
it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money.
Then what is
but
it?
she won't improve private insurance
I
for
gave
people,
you the
private
actual
medical
solution.
insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People are
Trump.
paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money,
Repeat
and they want to have
after
private.
me.
She wants everybody to be on
Public
government
option
insurance
for
when you
all.
wait 6
Single
months for an
payer type
operation that you need
system.
immediately.
President
But
Trump,
that
thank
single
you. We have
payer
another issue
can
that we'd
also
like to
not
get to
be the
that's important
single
for a number
sole
of
payer
Americans,
if
in
you want to
particular
pay
younger
in
voters, and that's
addition,
climate
just like you
change.
will for
President
elective
Trump, with
surgeries
regard to the
now,
environment, you
because
say
you're
that we have
rich,
to have
you
clean
can
air
have
and
your
clean
own
water.
private
Vice
insurance
President Harris,
if you
you
want
call
to
climate
contribute,
change an
but you also have
existential
the
threat.
ability
The
to have the
question to you
public
both
option
tonight is,
that
what would you
everyone
do
of the
to fight
nation
climate
has.
change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute
I
for
mean,
you
if you
each.
want to pay in
Well,
addition
the
for
former
some
president has said
elective
that
shit,
climate change
you're
is a
welcome
hoax.
to do that.
And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic
Oh, I'm
levels.
for
We have
fracking.
created over
Here
800,000
in
new manufacturing
Pennsylvania.
jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening
We're
up
so clean.
factories
We're gonna
around the
let
world.
you
Donald Trump
frack
said he was
here in
going to create
Pennsylvania.
manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs.
Fuck.
And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made
Includes
products,
fracking in
American
Pennsylvania.
automobiles. It
'Cause that's what
includes
you already said you were going to let them
growing
do.
what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs
party-
this last
third
month.
person, motherfucker.
It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto
will
Workers
come
and
into
any
the
auto
country,
worker,
and then
whether
the
it's in
tariffs will be
Detroit
passed
or
along
South
to the actual
Carolina or any
consumer.
other place. What they've done to
Just
business
like
and
tariffs always
manufacturing
do.
in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, They get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia.
Thank you
Back
very
in a moment.
much. Fuck.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue.
What in the absolute fuck are we watching? This is not good TV. I can't deal with this much longer. Holy motherfuck. Justin's still here? You're still here, Justin? I had to take off something. You know what I mean. You had to take off your clothing? I don't know what the fuck you mean. That's weird. But yeah, this debate's about to be over. I'm about to end this stream. Debut of the model on the presidential debate. And his voice may not stay. But for now, it is what it is. Dude, if they do this whole promotional ABC thing again, where dude is like running through the fucking war zone and then like jumping in a helicopter with his fucking flak jacket on and shit. If they do that, dude, it is so opportunistic and it is disgraceful. But I don't know if anyone else thinks that. I think I might be the only one who has like any sort of fucking normal morality left. I think everyone else is just like, yeah, that's normal commercialism. What did you think? What else was going to happen? We got this debate onto our channel, so even though we're government funded, don't tell anyone. We're going to fucking run ourselves, promote our shit during this debate. The fuck? Okay. We got the debate on the right. We got the shit on the left. Impact. Oh, isn't that one of the fucking YouTube people, girls? Oh, they're just rolling through a bunch of different things, huh? Ah, Philadelphia. I was there not too long ago. Originals. Who's that motherfucker? The Brat Pack. 1980s. Let's go. Pablo. James Cameron. BBC Studios. harassing the wildlife or video. ABC News, let's go. She's down on the floor.
Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris,
We
we begin with
appreciate you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the
No, I
past,
haven't.
and an attempt to take us backward.
I've heard two disasters.
But we're not
for our
going back.
country.
And I do believe that the American
I've had
people know
no
we all
one
have so much
articulate
more in common
real
than what separates
policies.
us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families,
him go
in what we
last
can
is
do
not a
around
good
protecting
idea.
seniors, what we can do that is about
He's gonna
giving
rebuttal everything you
hardworking
said.
folks a break and bringing down the
You have
cost
the
of
last
living.
word.
I believe in what we can
thank you
do
and good
together.
night.
That is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental
have
rights and
that.
freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do.
I love the look
I'll tell
she
you,
gives
I
him.
started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of
That's the
president we
only
need
question
right
you
now.
ever asked
Someone
them
who
as a
cares about
prosecutor?
you and is not putting themselves first.
What?
I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing
have
right now
4, maybe
in you,
8.
the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that,
See,
she's going to
he's
do
just
all
gonna
these
rebuttal
wonderful
all of
things.
this shit.
Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for three
Same
and a
reason
half
you
years.
didn't do
They've
it.
had 3.5 years to
Where's your
fix the
wall?
border.
Why were they
They've
still
had
in
3.5
Afghanistan?
years
Where's your
to
solution
create
to
jobs and all the things
Obamacare?
we talked about.
Hello.
Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it. Because you
Brother,
believe
I've
in
been
things that
saying that
the
about
American
you.
people don't believe in.
That's exactly
you believe
for
in
everything that
things
you
like
said you were
we're not
gonna
going to
do.
frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country
because they
for the sake
banned
of bad
nuclear in
vision. But I
Germany. Are
just
you
ask
unaware
one
of
simple
what's
question.
going on?
Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation
They're
that's in
regretting it.
serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughing. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed
Everyone
at
laughed
all
at
over
us
the
when
world. They
we
don't
elected
understand what
you,
happened to
too.
us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going
fuck,
on
man?
with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire
power of
military.
weaponry.
She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country,
What?
and maybe toughest of all,
We
is
didn't
allowing
give away
millions of
one warship
people
to
to
any
come into our
country.
country. Many
The
of them
shit
are
we left
criminals,
behind is
and they're destroying our
inconsequential to
country.
what we
The
actually
worst
have.
president, the
What in the
worst
fuck are
vice
you
president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC
I
News
told you that was
presidential
going to be his
debate from
rebuttal.
here in Philadelphia at the
Just
National
everything he
Constitution
says,
Center.
whatever you
I'm
said,
Lindsay
I'm
Davis.
gonna
And I'm David
rebuke
Muir. Thank you for
everything
watching
say.
here in the U.S. and
Rebuke
all
you in
over
the
the
name
world,
of the
and from
Lord.
all of
Boom,
us here
then I
at
get
ABC
shot.
News.
You know what I'm talking about? Well, that was such a great debate. Holy
And we
motherfucker!
are here live on
I
ABC with your
can't believe this
post-debate
was what we
comments.
got.
I'm
I thought
Martha
I was going to
Raddatz.
get
It was a
one
lively
more
debate from the
entertainment, just like
economy
I
to
thought I was,
abortion
just like I
to
thought I was going to get out of
Afghanistan.
Joe Biden.
They had it all, and it was historic.
And it was a disaster for him. This wasn't a disaster, but it definitely was not the entertainment that I thought it was going to be. And neither one of them sounded very intellectual or intelligent. Neither one of them had a policy on most of anything. This is not good. I mean, if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an American, or pretty much any sort of world citizen, because you know America leads the world, this is not good. Not good. What? It's just, I'm gonna have to stop this. I don't want to hear these people talk about it, but I'm gonna be done now. Anyone that saw this, thank you. I appreciate you. The debut of the VTuber model. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming. Please don't hate my cringe. It's just me. Little Goomba. Goodbye. Good night. Have a good life. You are loved. Even though the rest of the world is falling apart, our presidential candidates are users, losers, and not what we need. Even though there's still someone out there that cares about you, despite all of that.